All right, welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking a deep dive into the Global Payments Report 2025 from WorldPay.
Yeah, exciting stuff.
It's a fascinating report.
Yeah.
For me, and more importantly for you, the learner listening, it's really like a roadmap. It's showing us how we're all paying for things now, but more importantly, how we're going to be paying for things, in the years to come.
Absolutely. It's a great point. And it's not just about where things are at right now, right? We get this really cool historical perspective.
Yeah,
We look back, we see how much things have changed, but then we get this really nice in-depth view of where global payments are,
right.
across like 40 different markets. And then they go even further. They go all the way out to 2030, making these really fascinating predictions. They
Yeah.
even break it down by industry. So we can see like how people are paying for digital content, how
Wow.
they're paying in restaurants, retail stores, travel, all that. It's a very comprehensive report.
Yeah, it is. And that's really our mission today, right, for you, the listener.
Hmm.
We are wading through all of this.
Yes.
We are, going to point out the really interesting shifts, the surprising details, and hopefully you come away from this, well-informed, but not overwhelmed, because there's a ton of info here.
Absolutely. And it's really about taking those trends and understanding what they mean for us as consumers,
Yeah.
for businesses, and really how we just engage with commerce, both now and, 5, 10 years down the line.
Yeah, it's wild how much it's changed, just to kind of set the stage.
Yeah.
The report compares the current landscape to what they were seeing back in 2015 in their first report, and things were way different back then.
They really were. It's funny to think about it, but back then payments were, I guess what you could call it was traditional methods.
Right.
So we're talking cash. We're talking the cards, the debit and credit cards we all carry around.
Yeah, in our wallets.
In our wallets, exactly. But even then, there were signs, right? There were these alternative payment methods, the digital wallets, the BNPL, and those were starting to gain traction, really, because people wanted an easier way to pay, especially online.
It's so crazy to think about that was like a newer thing.
I know.
And one of the stats in the report, this was just shocking. Mobile share of global e-commerce, it's tripled in just a decade. It's gone from 19% in 2014 to 57% last year in 2024.
That's incredible growth. What's fascinating is it's not just about more people using their phones.
Right.
The total value, the actual money of those global e-commerce transactions went up over 6 times during that same period.
Oh, wow.
So it really shows you, like, the smartphone, it's the heart of how we're shopping now.
Yeah.
You start thinking about it, it's not just a phone, it's like a unified, shopping platform. We can do everything on it.
Yeah. And that's really interesting, this whole concept of unified commerce. Like,
Yeah.
what does that actually look like for people?
So imagine you're browsing on your phone, you're looking at something, you add it to your cart. You don't buy it right then, but maybe later in the day you're at the actual store and you can pull up that same cart on your phone.
Well,
Or maybe the associate, helping you can see it, and you just complete that purchase seamlessly. So that line between online, offline is really blurring.
right. Okay. So early mobile e-commerce,
Hmm.
I remember the days, it wasn't that smooth, was it?
No, it wasn't. It was clunky. You'd be on your phone, you'd be browsing, you'd try to buy something,
Yeah.
and then you'd have to switch to the desktop.
Yeah.
And, websites weren't really optimized for phones. It wasn't a great experience.
No. But things have changed. I mean, mobile technology has gotten better. Bandwidth has gotten so much better. Businesses, they've really put the effort into making sure their websites, their apps, they're really designed for mobile use.
They have, and the results are clear.
Yeah.
That share of mobile commerce is going to keep going up. They think it'll hit like 64% by 2030.
But what about things that could even challenge the smartphone? What about wearables? What about using biometrics?
I mean, that's really fascinating. Like, imagine paying with your watch,
Yeah.
or even just, using your fingerprint, your face, even your palm. That stuff's becoming more common, and it's super convenient.
Yeah, it's like right out of a sci-fi movie.
Hmm.
But is it safe?
That's the big question.
Yeah.
Biometrics, it's super personal. So we need to make sure that data is secure.
Right.
But the convenience, not having to carry a wallet,
Yeah.
not remembering passwords, I think a lot of people are going to be drawn to that.
Yeah. The report does seem to think that the smartphone, for the time being anyway, is going to stay the main way we pay.
I think that's right. But they do make an interesting point. They say, imagine if the smartphone companies, they really opened up their systems,
Okay.
like to third-party payment providers, kind of like what they do with apps.
Yeah.
That could create more competition. And when you have competition, you usually get more innovation. So that would be really good for us, the consumers. More choices, maybe even lower fees.
Yeah, that'd be great. Now, one of the things that the report really highlights is the role of fintech companies.
Fintech has been a game changer. Look at digital wallets.
Right.
In 2024, over $15.7 trillion in spending. That's over a third of all the consumer-to-business spending in the world going through digital wallets.
That's insane.
It's huge, and it's not going to stop there.
Right.
They're predicting over $28 trillion by 2030. To put that in perspective, that's bigger than the entire U.S. GDP in 2023.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So what is it about these fintech companies? What have they done that has been so successful?
I think they've been really good at taking best practices from all kinds of industries. Look at companies like PayPal, Gcash, PhonePay.
Right.
They built these payment experiences that are fast, they're secure, they're easy to use. They really put the user first.
Yeah.
And then you have these big online marketplaces like Amazon, Alibaba. They get consumer behavior.
Right.
And they built these payment systems that are really easy to use within their platforms. And then, of course, you have the big tech companies, Apple, Google, and even telecom providers. They all bring their expertise to the table, and it's really shaken things up.
So it's kind of like a perfect storm, right? Of innovation coming from all these different places.
Absolutely.
And BNPL, I mean, that's one area where fintech has really disrupted things.
BNPL is like the poster child for disruption.
Yeah.
The report says it went from $2.3 billion in 2015 to $342 billion in 2024. That's 5% of all online shopping globally.
That's massive growth.
It's insane, and it's not going to slow down. They're predicting 9% growth every year, hitting almost $600 billion by 2030. Even though banks and credit card companies are trying to catch up with their own installment plans, BNPL is here to stay.
Wow. It's really changed how people think about paying for stuff. And I love how the report has this timeline.
Oh, yeah.
Of all these big moments in fintech.
It's so interesting to look back and see how it all evolved.
Yeah. Like M-Pesa in Africa in 2007, that changed everything for mobile money. And then, Amazon Pay in the U.S. around the same time.
Amazon Pay, yeah, that was a big deal.
It really showed how these big companies are getting into the payments game.
Exactly. And then you have GoPay in Indonesia in 2010. It shows how different regions are innovating in their own ways.
Right. And then the Starbucks app in 2011.
Yeah.
I use that all the time.
Oh, yeah, me too. It's a great example of a company that's not a fintech company, but they built this payment experience that's so smooth and rewarding for their customer.
Yeah. So are there any other examples from the report that really stood out to you?
Oh, absolutely. The rise of dedicated BNPL companies like Affirm in the US, Paydi in Japan. Paydi was actually bought by PayPal, for a ton of money.
Wow.
Shows you how much potential there is there.
Yeah.
And then you can't forget about WeChat Pay in China, Momo in Vietnam. These guys are huge in their regions. In fact, the report says that Momo is now the top payment method, both online and in person, in Vietnam.
Wow. It's really fascinating to see how all these different payment methods have taken off in different parts of the world. Now, the report also talks about how much faster payments are becoming.
Yeah, that's real-time payments, or RTP. It's a big deal.
So what's different about that?
Okay, so traditionally, when you make a payment, it takes time for it to clear, right? Hours, sometimes even days.
Right.
But with RTP, the authorization and the settlement, it all happens practically at the same time.
So in seconds.
Seconds. It's super fast.
Wow, that has to be a huge advantage for businesses.
It is. For merchants, it means they have access to their money right away, 365. It lowers their costs. It's less risky. It's a win-win.
Yeah, it sounds like RTP is going to be a big part of the future of payments. So with all this talk about digital payments and new technologies, it's easy to think that cards are going away.
Right. But they're not.
But the report actually says cards are still super relevant.
Yeah, it's surprising, but it's true. Even with all these new ways to pay, credit cards, debit cards, prepaid cards, they're all still really important globally.
And they're not just sitting back and watching this happen, are they?
No, they're not. The card industry, they're innovating. They're coming up with new ideas to stay competitive.
Like what?
Like Click to Pay. It's a system from EMVCo, which is basically the group that sets the standards for chip cards.
Right.
So Click to Pay makes online checkout safer and easier. It uses things like tokenization. It just makes the whole process smoother and less risky.
And then there's that Visa flexible credential thing.
Oh, yeah, that's cool. It's basically one card that can access different accounts. So you could have your debit account and your credit line all on one card. Super convenient.
Yeah, I like that. And what about MasterCard getting rid of manual card entry in Europe?
That's a bold move. They want to phase it out completely by 2030. No more typing in those 16 digits.
Yeah, because it's not that secure, is it?
No, not really.
Someone could steal your info pretty easily.
Exactly. So they're pushing for tokenization where instead of your actual card number, you use a unique digital token that's way harder to steal.
Okay.
And then you have Pause, this digital wallet launched by a bunch of big US banks last year. It's clearly a move to compete with the other big digital wallets out there.
So it seems like card companies are really trying to keep up with the times.
They are. They're adding features like installment payments to compete with BNPL. They're making sure the card experience is secure, relevant, and easy to use.
And the report really drives this home with some interesting numbers.
Oh, yeah. It says that in 2024, when people use their cards directly, at a store or typed in their info online, that was still 45% of all global transactions.
Wow, that's still a lot.
It is. But then, get this, when you add in the cards that are linked to digital wallets, it jumps to 65% of all spending. That's like $29 trillion.
So even though we're using these new fancy digital wallets, we're still relying on our good old cards behind the scenes.
Exactly. The way we pay is changing, but the foundation, the infrastructure, especially cards, is sticking around.
And that Pase thing, those banks launching their own digital wallet, that's a pretty clear sign they're not going anywhere.
Yeah, they want to be part of the future of payments. Now, we can't talk about payments without talking about cash.
Yeah, cash is king, right?
Well, maybe not king anymore, but it's definitely not dead. The report says that even though its share of payments has gone down, it's not going away completely.
So how much has it gone down?
The report says that cash went from 44% of point-of-sale payments in 2014 to just 15% in 2024. That's a huge drop.
It is, yeah.
But the good news for cash lovers is that the decline is slowing down.
Okay, so it's not dropping as fast as it used to.
Right. They're predicting a decline of about 2% per year from now until 2030. So by then, cash will be about 11% of point-of-sale payments.
So that's still a lot of cash.
It is, and it's interesting. In some developed countries like Australia, Canada, France, the UK, and the US, cash use has actually stabilized at around 10%.
Wow, I'm surprised it's still that high in those countries.
Yeah, me too. But then in other parts of the world, cash is still the most popular way to pay in person.
Like where?
Places like Colombia, Indonesia, Japan, Mexico, Nigeria, Peru, the Philippines, Spain, and Vietnam.
Wow, so cash is definitely not going extinct anytime soon.
Nope. And even in those super digital Nordic countries, they predict that cash will still be used for at least 4% of transactions, maybe even more.
So why is cash so persistent? I mean, it's not exactly convenient for big purchases, and it's risky to carry around a lot of it.
Yeah, those are definitely reasons why a lot of people have switched to digital. It's just easier and safer. And for businesses, handling cash is a hassle.
Yeah.
But the report says that there's still a fundamental demand for cash, and that might not change anytime soon.
Okay, and what about this idea of a cashless society? Is that really fair to everyone?
That's a big concern. A lot of people don't have bank accounts or access to digital payments. Cash is essential for them. And that's why some countries like Denmark, France, and even some states in the US have laws saying businesses have to accept cash.
So they can't go completely cashless.
Right. And even the EU is trying to make sure people can still get cash easily.
Interesting. So cash isn't just going to vanish overnight.
No, and there's even talk about new innovations in cash, like central bank digital currencies or CBDCs.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about those.
Yes,
Are they going to replace cash?
probably not right away. The report thinks that CBDCs will be more like a supplement to cash,
Okay.
especially because they're still working on how to make them work offline.
Right. So cash is sticking around, but it might look a little different in the future.
Exactly. Now, the report also takes a look at specific industries, and I think this is where it gets really interesting. Let's start with digital content.
Okay, yeah, streaming services, ebooks, all that.
Exactly. So the big news here is that digital wallets are now the top way people pay for digital content globally. They've overtaken credit cards. Yep. And subscriptions are super popular. The report says that 68% of people who consume digital content use subscriptions.
Yeah, it seems like everything is a subscription these days.
I know, right? And in countries like Brazil, Australia, the US, and the UK, it's even higher.
So what's next for payments in the digital content world?
Well, the report says that we're going to see more personalization, getting payment options that are tailored to you.
Okay.
They're also talking about using AI to make payments even smoother and more seamless. And we might even see new payment methods designed specifically for certain platforms like games or virtual worlds.
So it's all about making it super easy and integrated.
Exactly. And now let's talk about something everyone loves, eating out at restaurants.
Yum. Yeah, let's talk about restaurants.
So in the restaurant world, the trend is towards faster, more invisible payments. You just pay with your phone, maybe even through the restaurant's app.
Yeah, I do that all the time. It's so much easier.
And digital wallets are really taking off for online food orders, especially in places like India and Germany.
Right. And speaking of restaurants, the report has this really cool story about the first credit card.
Oh, yeah, the Diners Club card. I love this story.
Tell me.
So back in 1949, this guy, Frank McNamara, forgot his wallet at a restaurant in New York City.
Oh, no.
I know, right? Awkward. So this gave him the idea for a charge card that you could use at a network of restaurants. And that was the birth of the Diners Club card, the first modern credit card.
Wow. So a forgotten wallet led to a revolution in payments.
Exactly. And as for the future of restaurant payments, we're talking about even more convenience. Things like facial recognition for payment, AI-powered ordering, maybe even fully automated checkout, like those Amazon Go stores where you just walk out.
Wow. So no more waiting for the bill. That would be amazing.
Right. Now let's move on to retail. What are we seeing there?
Retail, yeah, that's a huge industry.
It is, and consumers have a lot of power these days. They expect choices, they expect convenience, and retailers have to keep up.
Absolutely. So what are retailers doing to meet these expectations?
They're getting creative. They're offering different payment options to suit different preferences. They're making sure they can accept payments however the customer wants to pay.
And they're focusing a lot on delivery speed, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The report says that a whopping 96% of shoppers say that fast and reliable delivery is super important when they're shopping online.
Yeah, I hate waiting for packages.
Me too. And retailers are also getting better at creating a seamless experience between online and in-store shopping, what they call omnichannel. And they're using data to give you personalized recommendations. It's all about making the shopping experience smoother and more enjoyable.
Yeah. Now, what about BNPL in retail? Do people use it the same way for everything?
Actually, no. For example, in Australia, BNPL is really popular for clothes and shoes, but not so much for groceries.
Interesting.
So retailers really need to understand how people are using different payment methods for different types of purchases.
Makes sense. Now, let's talk about travel. That's an industry that's really gone digital.
It has. People used to rely on travel agents to book everything,
Yeah.
but now we do it all ourselves online. Airlines, hotels, they all have these great apps that make it super easy.
Yeah.
And mobile is king in travel. You can book your flights, your hotels, everything, all from your phone.
Super convenient.
And digital wallets are becoming more popular too, not just for booking, but also for paying for extras like baggage fees and stuff you buy on the plane.
Okay, and what about the future of travel payments?
The report paints a pretty futuristic picture. They talk about digital IDs, seamless payments, and AI helping to personalize your whole travel experience.
Like what?
Like, imagine checking in automatically, using biometrics to pay for your bags, getting personalized offers based on your travel plans.
Wow, that would be amazing.
Yeah, it would make traveling so much smoother. Now, let's talk about the financial services industry itself. How are banks and other institutions adapting to this digital revolution?
Yeah, good question. It seems like they're getting disrupted by all these fintech companies.
Well, they're definitely feeling the pressure, but they're also adapting. They're moving away from those old, slow, manual processes,
Right.
and they're embracing digital payments, account-to-account transfers. Those are becoming the norm.
Makes sense.
And consumers are demanding faster payments, real-time processing.
Yeah, we're impatient.
We are. But it's a good thing. It's pushing innovation. And security is still a top priority, both for consumers and for financial institutions.
Of course.
And AI is playing a bigger role too, helping to prevent fraud and give people personalized recommendations for how to pay.
Interesting. What about BNPL and social media payments? Are those making their way into financial services?
The report says that a lot of people are actually open to using BNPL for things like financial services, maybe buying insurance or making loan payments.
Wow.
And some people are even thinking about using social media for things like that.
Really? That's wild.
It is. It shows how payments are becoming more integrated into our everyday digital lives.
Yeah, it's not just about going to the bank anymore.
Exactly. And finally, let's talk about gaming.
Gaming, yeah, that's another industry that's constantly changing.
It is. Online and mobile gaming have exploded, and digital wallets are a big part of that. People are using them to pay for games, in-app purchases, all sorts of things.
Right.
And regulations are really shaping how payments work in gaming.
Okay, like what?
Well, in the US, the repeal of PassPA that opened up online sports betting, and that's a whole new area for payment processing.
Right.
And in Europe, PSD2, that's all about open banking, and that's impacting how people pay for games too. Account-to-account payments are becoming more popular in gaming as well.
Interesting. And are there any restrictions on how people can pay for games?
Yeah, actually, some places are starting to ban credit cards for online gaming and gambling, because they're worried about people getting into debt.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So this means people will probably use digital wallets, debit cards, or bank transfers instead. The future of gaming payments is all about security and following the rules.
And making it easy and integrated. Right.
Exactly. Now, it's important to remember that all these trends we've been talking about, they don't play out the same way everywhere. The report breaks down the payment landscape by region, and there are some fascinating differences.
Okay, let's talk about some of these regional variations. What's happening in Asia Pacific?
So in APAC, digital wallets are king. They're the most popular way to pay, both online and in stores. Debit cards are still big too, especially for in-person purchases and for funding those digital wallets.
Right. In Australia, they love BNPL down there.
They do. They use it way more than other countries. But each country in APAC has its own unique story. For example, in India, digital wallets are huge, and it's all thanks to this system called UPI, the Unified Payments Interface.
UPI.
It's like a super fast, real-time payment system that lets you transfer money between bank accounts instantly using your phone.
So that's why digital wallets linked to bank accounts are so popular in India.
Exactly. It's super convenient. But in Indonesia, while digital wallets are also big, people still use cash a lot to fund them.
Okay. What about Japan?
Japan is interesting. They still love their credit cards, especially for online shopping. They also use them a lot to fund their digital wallets.
Okay, so each country in APAC has its own way of doing things.
They do, and it's the same in Europe. Digital payments are growing fast, but cards are still important.
And they have their own versions of real-time payments, right?
They do, and some countries, like Belgium, use a lot of BNPL, while others, like Denmark, rely heavily on debit cards. Finland loves their bank transfers, and France still uses a lot of cash.
Wow, so much variation.
I know, it's fascinating. Germany is big on debit cards, especially the Giro card, and the Netherlands uses a lot of account-to-account payments through a system called Ideal. And in Sweden, BNPL is really popular, and they have their own real-time payment system called Swish.
So Europe is a mix of old and new.
It is. And then you have Latin America, where digital payments are growing rapidly, but cash is still king in many places.
Like where?
Like Colombia, Mexico, and Peru. They still use a lot of cash for everyday purchases. But Brazil, they're really embracing digital, especially with their PIX system, which is a real-time payment system.
Okay. And what about the Middle East and Africa?
That's a really diverse region. You have countries like Nigeria where they use a lot of account-to-account payments online, but cash is still dominant in stores. Saudi Arabia uses a lot of digital wallets online, but cards and cash are still important in person.
Hmm.
South Africa loves their cards, especially debit cards, but they also use a lot of cash. And the
Okay.
UAE, they're all about credit cards.
Okay, so lots of differences there.
Yeah. And finally, you have North America, where cards are still the most popular way to pay.
Yeah, we love our credit cards here.
We do. But digital wallets are growing, especially in the US, and BNPL is getting really popular in the US as well.
So we're starting to see those global trends here too.
We are. And even real-time payments are starting to catch on in North America.
So it's a global story with a lot of local flavor.
Exactly. So as we wrap up, what are the big takeaways from this report?
Well, it's clear that we've seen a huge shift away from cash and traditional cards towards digital payments.
Absolutely. Smartphones and fintech companies have been the driving forces behind this change.
Yeah. And while cards are still around, they're having to adapt.
They are. They're becoming more digital, adding new features, and working to stay relevant.
And cash? Well, it's not dead yet.
Nope, it's still hanging on, especially in certain parts of the world.
And I think the biggest takeaway is that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to payments.
Absolutely. Every region, every country has its own unique preferences and
Yeah.
challenges.
So what does the future hold for payments?
Well, the report says that we're going to see even more digital payments, more innovation in card technology, maybe even new forms of cash like CBDCs. And we're going to see more personalization, more payments tailored to our individual needs and preferences.
So the way we pay is going to keep evolving.
It is. And on that note, here's a question for you, the listener. What do you think will be the next big thing in payments? What new technologies are going to change how we buy and sell things in the next decade? And how will these changes affect both consumers and businesses? The future of payments is full of possibilities, and we can't wait to see what happens next. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of global payments.